Frieren is one of the most powerful characters in the manga. She has an insatiable quench for spells, she's extremely quick-witted on the battlefield, and her mana pool is insane. However, even someone as powerful as Frieren has taken L's specifically to people with less mana than herself, 11 to be exact. 4 demons, 1 elf, and the rest all humans. Humans stand out because unlike demons and elves, their lifespan is relatively short and thus wouldn't have anywhere near the mana Frieren has, nor the time to develop all the skills she's acquired over time. But as Frieren would attest to, the strength of a mage isn't solely based on one's mana pool, even though Or may disagree. Technique, experience, arsenal of spells, effort, willpower. These are some of the factors that weigh in during a battle between mages, but the one factor Frieren emphasizes is talent, an innate ability, a natural skill, something that can tip the scales in a battle between someone who is as seasoned as someone like Frieren versus someone relatively new to the scene like Ubel. Remember Ubel's introduction. It's not an accident that her debut to the story is directly after Frieren talks about how she lost to 6 humans with less mana than herself. The framing of the scene is meant to heavily imply that this woman is akin to the mages that Frieren has lost to. Less mana than her for sure, but possesses other qualities that can compensate for the disadvantage. So the big question is, what does Ubel have that makes her a problem? Which I'm more than happy to answer.
Mike Tyson, Razor Ruddock dies. If he doesn't die, it doesn't count. If he's not dead, it doesn't count.
In the Northern Lands, 3 bandits stumble upon Ubel all alone and, like the philanthropists they are, wish to relieve her of the burden of all of her valuables. Ubel, however, insists to bear the responsibility of keeping her valuables, but before the conversation can go any further, one bandit is attacked by the sharp-eared shredded Samaritan, Kraft the Monk. Seeing one of their friends put in the dirt by the sleep-inducing Saitama-like sucker punch, the rest of the philanthropist bandits scurry in a hurry. It is then Ubel and Kraft meet. Ubel thanks Kraft for saving her, while Kraft remarks that Ubel has the eyes of a killer. Kraft rejects Ubel's gratitude, stating that he didn't save Ubel's life, but instead saved the bandit's life, who she was undoubtedly preparing to kill. I mention this moment because it perfectly illustrates how dangerous one's mentality can make them. In all likelihood, Kraft might be stronger than Ubel, but it was her, not Kraft, that the bandits had to worry about. Simply put, being willing to kill anyone gives an edge to that particular individual because there's no hesitation nor restrictions that one has. And in combat where life and death can be determined by who moves a quarter of a second faster, Ubel's killer instinct is a valuable trait. Transitioning into more of the physical aspects of Ubel's strengths, let's talk about fighting styles and the uniqueness of Ubel's. Ubel is a mage that fights like a warrior, ditching a mage's conventional means of combat like a wand or grimoire, instead using her staff like a spear. One of the biggest weaknesses for a mage is their lack of proficiency in battle at close quarters. Even Frieren has mentioned this, stating that from the correct distance, Stark would be able to kill both her and Fern. It is why a mage will always be sure to create a healthy distance between themselves and their opponent to cast their spells, especially against warriors who have a natural physical advantage. Ubel, however, is a hybrid of a mage and a warrior. She can use her spells from mid-range, chipping away at her opponent, or come at them head-on, staff in hand, being adept at close range. If you look at all of Ubel's fights against Werbel, her clone, and Noi, in every single one, she is the one that closes the gap between her and her opponent, actively trying to get close to kill them. This isn't for the sole purpose of using her magic at the appropriate range either. Ubel is just comfortable fighting in the paint. Again, this method of fighting is not instinctual to mages, and what would be their Achilles heel is Ubel's bread and butter. Additionally, it helps having a method of fighting devoid of a limited resource like mana, because when your magic runs out and you have no spells left, either you have to throw in a towel or throw hands, as Dinkin. Greater than Ubel's warrior-like capabilities though is her signature spell that'll make Sukuna proud.
reelseiden.
As stated by Frieren, you can block almost any offensive spell by knowing a single defensive spell. However, due to the immense amount of mana required to maintain an all-encompassing barrier, mages preemptively block spells covering only targeted areas. But what happens when you don't know where you're being targeted? How do you defend against what you can't see? Well, the answer is you don't. Reelseiden is a spell that can cleave through almost anything, magic barriers being among one of the things it can't cut through. However, what makes this ability fearsome is that it's invisible, and so with no way to properly follow its trajectory, anyone within its range has 4 options to counter it: continuously guess where it will hit, take cover using an exhausting full barrier, stop Ubel from casting it, or haul ass in the opposite direction. For the first strategy, this is not a method that is feasible because it can't be kept up. In chapter 41, with the fight between Ubel and Ubel, although Ubel was able to defend against some of Ubel's slashes, he couldn't block them all and probably would have been cut fatally had the fight dragged on. For as skilled as someone like Ubel is, defending against something you can't see with a small shield is much too challenging. As for the second strategy, this is probably the quickest way to be killed. Using defensive magic to encase oneself is extremely draining to a mage, making it only viable as a last resort. In a real fight against Ubel, someone using defensive magic in this manner would be safe for a minute tops, run out of aura, and would get bisected immediately afterwards. The third method is the best strategy against Reelseiden and has been proven to work. In all of Ubel's on-screen fights, all of which she was the technical loser in a one-on-one sense, she was stopped from casting Reelseiden before being beaten. Against Ubel, he casts Sorganil, which binds Ubel and stops her from using magic. Against her clone, it also casts Sorganil, restricting Ubel. And against Noi, Ubel is bound by one of his spells that strips her of sight and mana detection, rendering Reelseiden as ineffective. The whole point here is against Ubel, offense is your best defense. As for the last strategy, if this was Ubel from the first time we saw her, Reelseiden wouldn't be as daunting. Originally, the limit of Reelseiden's range was 5 meters, which is troublesome but not unavoidable. But after 2 years, Ubel expands it to an insane level. In chapter 131, we see Ubel be able to cut half of a tower diagonally, covering about 3 stories of the building. Now, we don't get a proper measurement of this feat, but with the knowledge that 3 stories of a normal building is approximately 9 to 12 meters, this means Ubel has doubled her range. Also, given the context that Ubel cut the building as a distraction to threaten the lives of the people below it, there's a possibility that Reelseiden's range is even more outrageous than shown, meaning if you're in range of this attack, unless you can teleport, the only thing that's running is you out of ideas. The true terror of Reelseiden is not the range, nor the power, nor the elusivity, but instead the mind of its owner.
Imagination.
Magic in Frieren is a representation of one's personality and imagination. Visualization is crucial in all facets of magic. That is, you won't be able to do something if you don't think or see yourself doing it. And echoing mantras trying to convince yourself of achieving a feat you deem impossible will not work either. From the fiber of your being, from the core of your soul, you have to believe in what you can do, even if it may seem nonsensical to others, and that is Ubel's superpower. In chapter 54, Ubel did the unthinkable. In the second exam, deep inside the dungeons, mages were faced against perfect replicas of themselves equipped with their magic and abilities. This proved to be a challenge, but bearable as the weaknesses of each clone was exploited with the remaining mages' teamwork. However, 2 clones in particular were a problem. The clone of Frieren, who Frieren and Frieren herself were tasked to fight, and Sense's clone, who of the remaining mages, no one could match in power at all. Sense is able to manipulate countless strands of her hair, which she stacks layers upon layers of defensive magic, giving her an ultimate shield and spear. That is, unless Ubel decides she wants to roleplay as a barber. 2 years ago, during the second phase of the second class mage exam, the examinees were tasked with making the examiner, Bird, take a step back while he stands in one spot, perfectly still. Bird specialized in defense magic and since becoming a first class mage has never been injured thanks to his immovable cloak, which blocks any offensive magic from penetrating it. We see the effect of this cloak as attacks directed towards Bird do absolutely nothing, making it abundantly clear the examinees are more of a danger to themselves than they are to Bird. However, Ubel's turn is up, and to the horror of Bird's fellow examineers, he gets bisected effortlessly, making what should have been impossible possible. Fast forward to the first mage exam, and Ubel achieves the same seemingly preposterous feat against Sense, chopping through her magically imbued hair like nothing. From Ubel's point of view, despite the defensive properties of both Bird's cloak or Sense's hair, both are material that can be cut. Cloth is cloth. Hair is hair. Why wouldn't I be able to cut through these things? That is how Ubel thinks. For most mages, slicing through these barriers would be unthinkable, but for Ubel, it is second nature because she believes in her heart that she can do it. Make no mistake though, reelseiden isn't just broken because it can cut through defenses. As in chapter 131, we get to see the full extent of its power. In this chapter, Ubel and Land are captured by the Empire and are bounded by a rope that disrupts their mana, effectively shutting off their magic. Against the principles of the spell they're under though, Ubel is able to cut through Land's ropes using reelseiden, proving that her imagination in using reelseiden can bend the preconceived rules of magic. After all, a rope can be cut. And this tendency for Ubel to lean on her emotions rather than logic leads to her game-changing ability, copying magic through feel. Some mages spend their whole lives honing their magic, developing and learning spells from all over the world, adding to their array of techniques. Ubel doesn't have time for that. Through empathizing with someone, Ubel can replicate other people's spells without an understanding of how it works, which probably explains why Ubel is always looking to chat with people whether they are annoyed by her or trying to kill her. The limits of this ability are unknown to us, and thus far, we have only seen Ubel copying an ability once, that being Sorganil. Either way you slice it though, this is a broken ability. Even with just a spell like Sorganil, it can completely immobilize someone as long as their whole body is in view. It's strong enough to capture a stele which can move at supersonic speeds and are as tough as dragons. Ubel now has an ability like that a part of her arsenal and has the potential to steal more without the need to properly learn it. Just picture Ubel empathizing with Land and being able to use his cloning spell, which she can now use in concert with reelseiden, attacking someone with invisible slashes from multiple angles all at once. It makes Ubel even more unpredictable than she already is, being that at the drop of a hat, it's possible that she can get stronger mid-battle, mirroring one of her opponent's spells. At this point in the video, I have nothing more to say as far as Ubel's abilities or feats. However, I do want to mention all of the testimony Ubel has received as far as her threat to others, because I think it accumulates to shape Ubel as a legitimate problem for even the strongest of mages. This moment I already talked about a bit, but just for more context, Krav stumbles upon Ubel, stopping her from killing more bandits, and remarks that she has the eyes of a killer. He then further states that upon discovering the corpses of Ubel's victims, that it was the work of a frightfully skilled mage. This statement means a lot more given the fact that Krav is an elven adventurer who is even older than Frieren and thus has a tremendous amount of life experience. That is to say, Krav calling Ubel a skilled mage isn't ignorant glazing. This is a man who has no doubt come across the most weak to the most powerful mages in his adventures and would be a great appraiser as to Ubel's talent. After Ubel fails her mage exam, she has a conversation with Sense. In seeing how Ubel was able to overcome Bird's immovable cloak, Sense states that Ubel's mentality in believing in her heart rather than logic is in the realm of genius. And this is from a genius mage in her own right. Sense then goes on to say, and I quote, "I just cannot imagine myself beating her. She's simply the worst match for me." C-Ray was to be next if I was going in chronological order, but for the sake of the narrative, I'll skip ahead to Ubel and save C-Ray for last. In chapter 59, Ubel and Frieren have a run-in with each other, where Frieren checks Ubel about his attempt on Fern and others' lives. Ubel brushes this off and states that what he did was just an idle threat, but thinks about somebody he actually should have killed, that person of course being Ubel. Now to me, Ubel's apprehension towards Ubel is more rooted in her lack of morality rather than him believing her to be too strong. However, Ubel's strength goes hand in hand with the threat she poses, as why would Ubel be concerned with the bloodlusted weak mage? His staunch distaste for Ubel is because he knows she would be able to carry out the malice she exudes. Chapter 131, in the aftermath of Ubel and Lan being captured, Noi and Kanone have a talk. Kanone wonders why Noi acted rashly to capture Lan and Ubel instead of waiting for him, and Noi remarks that they'd be a danger if left to their own devices. He goes on to say he deemed Ubel in particular to be a dangerous individual, and remarks that Ubel's sensibility reminds him of his captain, Phrase. And to put in context how high of praise this is, understand this. Noi is a part of the Empire's magic special forces, which are a select few mages that specializes in warfare and quelling uprising involving mages. In other words, this unit are the counters to first-class mages. So Noi acknowledging Ubel as a serious threat is already crazy enough, but to compare her to Phrase is wild to say the least. Phrase in her prime was stated by Mott, one of the 7 sages of destruction, to be able to destroy the entire fortress city of Whis. Mott was so threatened by Phrase that he practically begged Gluck for permission to kill her, making her the first person he proposed to assassinate. And take into account Mott's general apathy towards most mages, him deeming Phrase as someone he needed to kill is the greatest compliment to her strength. And that is the same woman that is now being mentioned in the same breath as Ubel. Now this one is very subject to interpretation. In chapter 58, Ubel along with Fern, Dinkin, Lan, Ubel, and Methode all passed the first mage exam. However, unlike everyone else named, Ubel is the only person that passes without a single word between her and C-Ray prior. Whether explicit or implicit, C-Ray has a reason to pass everyone except for Ubel. They literally stare at each other for a brief moment, and then C-Ray passes Ubel, but uncovering why this happened is a testimony that adds to the narrative of Ubel being a problem. First and foremost, in a previous chapter, chapter 57, Frieren states that C-Ray will go by her instinct on whether she passes someone or not, but also states C-Ray's instinct is never wrong. We see this to be true as she essentially reads the minds of the examinees in a small exchange. In her evaluation of Kane, she's able to deduce that she is afraid of her mana and that she cannot envision herself as a first-class mage yet. With Dinkin, she is able to discern his still bright burning will that is betrayed by his outwardly aged appearance. So the question is, what did C-Ray see in Ubel? The answer to that is exactly what Kraft saw in Ubel, the eyes of a killer. When Ubel approaches C-Ray, she maintains her eerie smile and calm demeanor, seemingly never wavering even in the face of a mage as powerful as C-Ray. For all of my Hunter x Hunter fans, this is almost akin to the moment in the Hunter exam when Hisoka meets with Netero and talks about how he wants to fight him. As to what Ubel was thinking at that moment is anyone's guess, but I like to insert my own theory. Given that Ubel is constantly willing to engage in death matches against people thought to be stronger than herself, I believe Ubel was thinking of a way to kill C-Ray in that very moment. Furthermore, because of Ubel's uncanny ability to copy techniques, I think she also wanted to empathize with C-Ray and steal a spell from her, and this is why C-Ray cuts her conversation with Ubel short. Lastly, with the way C-Ray passed Ubel, I got the sense that she did so reluctantly. With Fern, Dinkin, Land, and Werbel, they all showed C-Ray something that visibly brought her joy. Whether it be their pure talent, tenacity, audacity, or philosophy, C-Ray passed these examinees with a smile on her face. Methode is the only one that C-Ray didn't smile when she passed her, but there was still this comedic air around that scene since Methode calls one of the most powerful characters in the entire series tiny and cute. But then you look at how C-Ray passed Ubel and there's no explanation, barely a conversation, and no sense of joy in the atmosphere. If anything, there's an odd tension that exists. The way I interpret it as to why that's the case is because C-Ray sees that Ubel has the talent to be a first-class mage, but given her malicious nature, it's a question of is it morally right to pass her? Ultimately, for C-Ray, she seems to care more about the power than morality, and thus she passes Ubel readily, but not happily. In summary, I think Ubel's killer mentality, her combat prowess as both a mage and a warrior, her signature spell reelseiden, which is powerful in of itself, paired with her vast imagination which allows her to visualize things on a genius level and essentially break the rules of magic. Her ability to empathize with people and learn magic by feel, which allowed her to take a powerful spell like Sorganil. And probably the most important thing is how the narrative expresses her potential through character testimony. There is a reason why these characters keep being wary of Ubel. Ubel is my favorite character in Frieren, so there's no doubt that bias fills my lungs when I speak about her, but I think I laid my points out quite well. Let me know if you agree or disagree with some of the points I made throughout the video, and let me know if you want me to do more videos covering Frieren, because I have an itch to talk about a certain mean-spirited elven girl. Or if you would like live reactions or discussions talking about the latest chapters or batch of chapters, because Frieren is coming back. And also, if you still haven't liked the video, are you going to continue to betray me? That is it for me, guys. I am Satsuki the Savage. Y'all have a good night, morning, afternoon, wherever you may be. Peace and love. I am out.
Life is just death, taking its time. Who gon' take it from my hand? Was lonely before friends. I'm holding my own hand and taking these bad shots, just hoping they go in. Everything folds in.